I do draw a lot of comparisons to Johnny Manziel, so
Gotta let him cook.
Hunter hockey stick.
Hunter CrossFit. Good morning, Misfits. You are tuning into another episode of the Misfit Podcast. Full Goon Squad in the house.
Yo.
Hey, gentlemen.
hey,
What's up?
Do you know that we're doing it again? We're starting over again for the 12th time.
I'm gonna say, what year is this?
This is number 12. This is the 12th
phase one.
Yeah, 12th phase one that we've done.
Previously known as cycle one.
Previously known as Cycle
The
1.
artist formerly known as Cycle 1.
And a little backstory. Sherb will definitely remember this. Ted maybe. And I don't know if you were in on any of these meetings, but when we started the website, I was still a project manager for a construction company. And what I would do is I would make a week of the
Gantt chart?
template. And it would be like, okay, so I'm going to go pitch this to the coaches. Day one is push press, mandatory Metcon, non-mandatory interval, like build this thing out. And it was just 1 week of it. And then I would print it on the blueprint printer. And I would come into the gym with a like 3 or 4 foot wide piece of paper and like lay it down and be like, all right, boys, like, let's sanity check this. Like this goes here, that goes there. Well, if we're going to do like super heavy back squats on this day, like should the like monostructural work be more like longer distance, like that sort of thing. And we would go through that block by block. Do you remember that?
I remember doing it at
Should do a
Arrow one
throwback.
time.
We should do that again.
We did it at Arrow
Do
one
that
time.
for phase one.
We went
Once
to
a
the
week.
conference table and we laid
Yeah.
that piece of paper on the giant.
The first time we
conference
did it
table.
though, it was in that that little office.
I remember.
And I think I just put it on probably just put it on the
I
ground.
was on the floor probably.
Definitely don't remember that. I feel like I remember like the giant paper
Yeah.
somewhere maybe floating around. I definitely wasn't
Glued to the
involved in those
ceiling.
meetings, but I do remember.
Well,
that.
I
But,
worked
like,
there, I believe, through 2015. So 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 4 years that I was doing both. So at some point, I definitely used the blueprint printer.
thought you were gonna say you made a Gantt chart or something like that.
No, no, definitely not.
We should do that. We should just program 1 week.
What's a Gantt
Doing one week of programming at a time. Like, you guys, how's this look?
So it
probably
wasn't,
gets
there
done.
wasn't
That probably
any,
gets
so
done.
to clarify, there wasn't any programming in it. But back then, it could be simplified more to like, we're doing short Metcons that are mandatory on Monday, that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Nice.
And the weird thing about it is how similar my process is now, with the fact that there's absolutely nothing similar about it, because I do still start, like, I love the template portion of it. Like this piece goes here, I move this around. Okay, well, especially now with the addition of, there's like another column in there with the addition of the more of the zone 2 stuff, which is typically in addition to maybe like a non-mandatory bitch work piece. So you could have like 400 meter run intervals on the same day as you're doing like a zone 2 row in the morning or something to that effect. So it's crazy to think about that, about how like some part of my brain was already so used to that style and probably from my occupation to like, now, obviously, things are just so much different. It's so much more complicated, and we break things down on such a granular level. But it's just cool to think back to like, I still could. I'd have to go over to Arrow and be like, yo, let me use the blueprint printer. But I could make a gigantic version of. We don't need to. We have a projector and like computer.
Nah, we should go back to
We
that.
got like computers and stuff. I don't even remember if that was Google Sheets. That might have been still been Open Office.
I
Like,
used to love those files.
Fuck.
You used to send those
We
to
go
us.
back
I'm like,
to
what
that.
the hell? How do I open this thing?
Go
What
back
app
to
do I
that.
need?
We use Paint. We use Microsoft Paint instead of Google Sheets.
so yeah,
Google's listening.
number 12. Year number 12 for phase 1. Pretty crazy to think about.
It's quite a few phase ones. That's a
Yeah.
lot of different
Is
restarts.
this the longest? Have we had phases that exceeded 9 weeks before? Because we're now going in this year.
So-
we've got a little change. It's
yeah.
9-week phases instead of 7 weeks.
We
if you're-
mentioned a decent amount about the new phase structure in the Phase 0 podcast, which we can cover pretty easily today. Instead of 4 7-week phases, we have 3 9-week phases. And the only time that a phase in the past was longer than 7 weeks is if it was during like a competition block, and
had
we
to,
were
like,
doing
extend it
basically
by a couple
a
weeks, right?
GPP rotation. We had a lot of weird shit going on during the like 2020 season with like, here's our plans, and then like
Move
CrossFit
back,
Games
move
is in
back,
October.
move back,
Just
move
kidding.
back.
CrossFit Games
yeah,
is tomorrow.
exactly. So we had some periods of time there where it just didn't make any sense to do that, but we never sat down and said the best program that we can write is in 9-week chunks. And again, we've covered it already, but just the backstory on that is the idea of, if we have a test and retest week, is that 5-week chunk in the middle sufficient enough to follow certain lifting progressions or bias certain movements, or, you know, really hammer down on, you know, this pathway on this machine.
It also allows you to deload if you need to in the middle of the phase too, so you don't miss, you know, 20% of the phase by taking a week to take, you know, chill because your
Right.
body's beat up.
Yeah. So typically this podcast, if you're listening to a different episode, we would talk about nerd ropes and crumble cookies and
All the good things in life.
Still, it's
all
been
good
X
things.
days since last crumble cookie incident.
Really?
You need like a sign behind you. How many days?
Yeah, how many days? I don't know.
How many days
yeah.
it's been? 6,
It's been a minute.
7?
So we gotta call OSHA the next time he has crumble cookie.
36 hours.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
So this programming type podcast is going to be a bit more open-ended and a bit more of a peek behind the scenes in how we think about programming and how we think about coaching versus reading the phase guide to you. So if you're going to, there's going to be some new blog content up, misfitathletics.com. There's going to be some new, sort of graphical elements on Instagram. There's going to be downloadable stuff within the articles and on Discord and in different places. And we don't need to take an hour and a half to say we're doing this and we're doing this and we're doing this. Maybe why we're doing certain things I think would be really helpful. So just so everyone knows how to think about going to misfitathletics.com and getting your programming and where you should be, it's really, really simple in terms of MFT. The MFT program is for semifinals and CrossFit Games athletes. If you were on the fringe of semifinals last year for maybe like a smaller reason, maybe one workout didn't go well, dog ate your homework, like just the different things that could happen that you feel like was a bit more of like a self-sabotage or the universe getting after you, then of course MFT could be appropriate for you. The Hatchet program. When you go to the Hatchet program on a daily basis, there's going to be instructions for open athletes, quarterfinals athletes, and that's all divisions, and then semifinals and games athletes if you are an age group, masters or teens. So all three sets of instructions are in there. I will say it publicly. We are working on what we feel like is the best way to deliver these programs to you, but there are specific nuances and differences for each group of people within that program that are really important. So don't feel like because you're clicking on Hatchet that you are not following the open version, the quarterfinals version, the masters version. As we build out that template, our goal is to provide enough crossover so that there's a real awesome community element. The open athlete will do most days like a lift and a conditioning piece, which will be the same lift or conditioning piece with scaling and equipment modifications in there for you to go through and make sure you're getting the right workout and the right stimulus. That's going to cross over with those other programs, but then down the line, what you are adding to that is what's going to individualize it for you and sort of slot you into your group of, I am one of these things. So all of those communities live under the Hatchet program. And that is a sort of a thoughtful decision to bring all of you together to be able to go into Discord and communicate with each other, to communicate with us as coaches. But that's how you want to think about going in. And luckily the instructions are clear and obvious. You'll go in and it'll tell you, I am a games athlete, I am a semifinals athlete. You choose where you're at. based on previous years, and you go in and you follow those instructions. And maybe at some point you update where you're at, what your goals are, how you're progressing. But I would say sort of categorize yourself before phase one and lock into those instructions.
And if something's not clear, that's what Discord's for. We have that questions channel within the Discord for any questions you might have out there for yourself. And, one of the things I've noticed recently is that channel is sort of quieted down with, I think, everyone just kind of going into the lab and being like, I got to test all these things. And I basically know what I need to be doing right now. But as the season gets closer and closer, that athlete anxiety might come back out, or, some indecisions based upon, hey, I thought I was this, but I looked at my scores relative to other people. Maybe I'm one step ahead of where I thought I was. Use that channel to ask questions, interact with us. That's one thing I've noticed recently is I haven't fielded as many questions as I had, in the entire phase 2, phase 3 comp block part of the year. So if you're unfamiliar, unsure about something, get in there, ask those questions, because if you're asking the question, probably somebody else also has that same question.
Hunter, one of the things that you went in a while back and added into the program for phase 0 is, this is your short duration muscle endurance test. And obviously all those categories are there. How do you transition from phase 0 to phase 1 with the information that you just gathered?
So instead of so in phase 0, you'll see, if it's a Misfit benchmark, I think that's exclusive to the Misfit benchmarks. This is your X duration, X stimulus test, record it, see how it goes, sort of thing. So we give you, in the kind of typical phase 1, 2, 3 program, we still provide you with that same thing, just not written out like that. We'll still provide you with the intended kind of duration of the workout, the intended stimulus, whether it's a gas, muscle overload, or cardio stimulus. And those definitions, their associated definitions, are on Misfit Athletics if you dig through the blog a little bit. And then the pacing instruction as well, as far as how when we write this piece, how we think it should be attacked, assuming that you are doing the correct version of this workout for you. We expect you to be in this time frame. We expect it to elicit this stimulus, and therefore you need to attack it, or maybe backwards. You need to attack it at this pace in order to be done in this duration and achieve this stimulus. As far as translating that information from phase 0 into the program, you have a couple options, but ultimately it just comes down to paying attention to the things that you struggled with in phase 0. If you recognize that, for me personally, I do not like, I guess I'll say, medium duration muscle overload workout. I really dislike the muscle overload stimulus. I game my way around it as much as I can to try to kind of turn it into a stimulus that allows me to perform better. What I should then identify is one, if I have a mandatory medium muscle overload piece, that gets a little star, a little red box next to circle it, kind of whatever, to identify that this is a piece that you should pay attention to, because maybe the movements are actually in your wheelhouse, but if you do the workout as intended, the stimulus will theoretically improve your, I guess, anaerobic ability to move through movements with big sets, for example, of 5 rounds of 20 chest to bar pull-ups. That's a great example of something that I would really struggle with. I'd have to think about how to game it, or to think about how to attack it. And then similarly, when you go in and see the optional pieces for the day, which is, every category, whether you're following MFT or Hatchet, will have mandatory pieces that we're saying hey, you really should do this because we are accounting for these movements and time domains in the larger picture. But then subsequently, you need to pick workouts, whether it's based on the movements because they're weaknesses. I'm not very good at muscle ups, so I need this muscle up skill work. I'm really uncomfortable on the rower, so today I need the rowing bitch work. Or maybe taking it a step further, it's wow, I have these 2 metcons that I can choose from. One is a long cardio piece, one is a medium muscle overload piece, and you get to pick one of the 2. Well, if my intention is to get better, I need to select the medium muscle overload piece because I am much more comfortable with the long kind of steady state cardio, or the movements never exceed kind of my capacity to do them. Instead, I really need to attack a workout based on the stimulus, not exclusively just like, oh, I don't like thrusters, so I'm going to do that workout because it has thrusters in it. It's like,
Right.
there's another layer to that within the athlete IQ kind of triangle that says like, well, I might be good at thrusters, but when it comes to a thruster wall walk where there's a muscle overload stimulus, I really fall apart. So I'm going to choose to, I need to attack that because of the stimulus, not so much because of the movement specifically.
I think it's important to put out there too. There are different meanings that are come back around to sort of be the same when it comes to, I give you guys the same stimulus to write a workout that we turn around and give to the athlete. It is the programmer's job to create a scenario where there's maybe an insinuation of how the workout should be attacked.
Yeah.
But the phase-wide bias for phase 1 is muscle endurance workouts. So every single day, there is a mandatory piece, like 100% of the time on the MFT side, that has muscle endurance in it. Now, you shouldn't need, as the athlete, to think about the programming side of things. You should go into it and say, what makes this a muscle endurance workout? More importantly, what makes this a muscle endurance workout for me? And what can I do to get better at that particular stimulus? So you mentioned a workout, let's say it's a medium triplet and it's got five rounds and 20 chest to bar pull-ups in it. You know that, let's say, is it fair to say that it probably wouldn't be 2 sets the whole time if you were gaming it?
If it were 5 rounds with 20 chest to bar pull-ups, I would almost certainly have to do like 3 sets.
Right. So can Hunter go into this workout, ego aside, knowing that maybe if he's working out at the same time as someone else, it's camaraderie, and say the rowing is going to go down 5 seconds, 5 full seconds per 500 meter. And I am going to fucking, break up shouldered overhead or front squats in a way that I normally wouldn't. And I'm going to do 13 and 7 this whole workout.
Yep.
And I'm going to, like, as I'm working through this workout, I have to every single round be like, how hard was that? Did I choose the right pace? Can I go a touch faster, touch slower? And you literally, the whole workout is based on how do I feel entering and exiting the chest to bar pull-ups, knowing that I'm going to go in and do that. That is how you execute on that. And that is how you tinker with these things and get yourself to a point where phase 1 muscle endurance, can I like up the sets that I would normally do? Like, because he might still come around to the open and do 3 sets, but they're easier. Maybe they're closer to even. He doesn't have to add a single or a double at the end. It's very intentional. That's what we're looking for. We go into phase 2 and now it's gas tank stimulus. And we are going to ask you to find your threshold on certain things in the moment. Because essentially with these 3 things we're finding our threshold on the movement, specifically in muscle endurance. We're finding the threshold within maybe a movement or maybe the total stimulus when it comes to gas tank workouts. I'm going to push harder in this workout specifically at a certain point than I normally would. Cardio workout, we want to find your threshold as the clock beeps as you finish, right? And that's why we follow this trajectory. Like, it's not necessarily lower intensity, because I like the idea of intensity meaning different things, but it's intense focus on more specifics within the workout in phase 1 and phase 2. And then, like, how good is my athlete IQ? Like, can I game a better finish on this workout than someone who's fitter than me?
Like in your example where you said, like, well, come the open, Hunter might do 3 sets. That's the distinction between training and testing.
Of course.
So it's like when we're doing that in phase 1, day 1, when it's, I'm going to hold myself to 2 sets of pull-ups and the rest of the workout is going to quote unquote suffer. That is training. That is good training. That's useful. That's valuable. Assuming then that you take that information when 5 rounds of 20 chest to bar pull-ups comes up in the open and you say, I remember doing this. I've been training this. I know that 2 sets might still be a reach, but I can definitely do 3 sets, and that is going to give me the best score, which is testing.
That's actually something I wrote about in an article probably about 2 years ago during the middle of the pandemic. Said, quit making it easy. And it's exactly what you just talked about. Like, it's easy to rely on your strengths and kind of put your weaknesses aside and go, all right, I'm going to beat you in this workout because I can hammer the assault bike and you can't. So I'm going to beat you in this. And that's just like a surface level, like, hey, it's fun to beat your training partners, but like, are you getting better at what you're trying to actually achieve here, which is hopefully a better placement or a better, ranking wherever that is in the world. You know what I mean? So why not go into a workout with the idea of like, if I can set aside the gratification of winning this single workout on a random Wednesday in the middle of June to then perform better at the end of the season because I, didn't highlight my strength in the middle of the season. I actually put my strength aside and actually focused on the things that need the attention, the chest to bar pull up, the handstand push up, or the legless rope climb. And that means, I run a 2-minute 400 or I row at a 210 because that's what's going to allow me to do that. That is smarter training that pays off in the long run. And that sort of, is exactly in line with what you just said about intensity can mean different things.
Yeah.
It can be intensity of focus. Like I'm going to figure out what kind of mental cadence I need to do every single time so that my chest to bars are consistent. So I can do 1 or 2 sets every single time.
Right.
As opposed to intensity just means me I'm dry heaving on the floor at the end of the workout.
There's almost like this, when we come back to the mean, we can see how people execute on large sets of movements within the sport. Like if it's, whatever, a chipper and it's got 50 handstand push-ups in it, your, outlier is going to do maybe 1 big set, 2 small sets. Someone who is the outlier on the other side has to do even small sets the whole time in between. And then in the middle, we sort of see these strategies. As we transition from the muscle endurance to phase 2 with the gas, he really averages 14 burpee box jump overs a minute when, in these nasty workouts, and like saw that asshole's Echo Bike screen and, it's 500 watts right now or however many RPMs, whatever you're using, like that's possible. So we don't need to all of a sudden snap our fingers and we can do those things, but we might go into that workout and say, man, I typically only hold like 350, like in a workout like this. I'm going to go 450 today and see what happens to the rest of the workout. So I guess the challenge to the people following the program that are on Discord is maybe throw in what you're working on that day. Because as a remote coaching client, if you apply for remote coaching, I'm going to tell you like in, right below the cell, like this is what I want you to be focusing on to attack, especially at this time of year. So as we're going into it, we'll do that. And then what could be really cool is I worked on this for my muscle endurance. I worked on this for my gas tank. And then now, like almost like, how did we game it? How are those scores even possible when the cardio stimulus shows up quite a bit in phase 3? So probably the biggest difference in our programming from years past to now is the entire strength schedule for MFT and Hatchet is different. So typically in the past, you could go in as someone who lived in no man's land, which we do not recommend at all, and didn't really have a program. It's like, I want to be able to see all of them so I can, pluck pieces out. That's not going to be as smooth to be able to do that now. You want to go in and again, categorize yourself, and there's a bit of trusting the process within that. So just to give some examples here, we find that the back squat volume phase is most advantageous right before doing a heavy Olympic lifting phase next. So basically we need Hatchet athletes to be ready to hit a 1 rep max snatch, clean and jerk, those movement patterns, maybe some variation of those things in open and quarterfinals. Whereas with MFT athletes, we don't need that to happen until semifinals of the CrossFit Games. And there's a really big difference in that. So the program very much for the Hatchet athlete is built around getting your legs under you now, and then going in and, at the same time, we're going to work on technique in one of the Olympic lifts and then bias that. And then the other one will be biased in phase 2. And then we'll finish up in phase 3 where you've gone heavy and worked on position stuff within all of this. On the MFT side, we are very much working towards developing the clean and the snatch more early on in the off season to be able to identify a very long-term plan for our semifinals and games athletes to then get their legs under them in phase 3, very much so, and almost personalize their journey of what took place in the off season within semifinals prep and CrossFit Games prep. You guys have any thoughts on that? I mean, you've obviously seen the entire strength schedule. It follows a bit of a different cadence.
I think it's just important that that's a good, like, having that happen in phase 1 is good because it forces the athlete to like you kind of said, categorize yourself. With the way that we have it set up, if you follow the Hatchet program, you are set up to best succeed in the open and quarterfinals. If you maybe the ego is a little bit too much and you're like, yeah, I'm an MFT athlete, and you follow the MFT strength work and don't find that you're feeling quite as good come quarterfinals in the open, even though that's like maybe a sticking point for you. It's like, make the decision now as to what is realistic for you by the end of the season. And I'm not saying that you can't follow the Hatchet program and like there's a 0% chance you would magically qualify for semifinals.
We had 2 people ridiculous. Last year following the Hatchet program or following Hatchet program volume that competed at semifinals and or the CrossFit Games. I'll just throw that out there.
It's not necessary. It's more just like understanding that there is a kind of a long-term structure to it, and being realistic with where you anticipate your season ending gives you the best chance at going as far as you can, or maybe even surprising yourself and going farther. And again, it's not like, it's like, shoot, I've been doing this strength program since September and I accidentally qualified for semifinals. Like, there's no way I'm ready. It's like, that's not a thing that could happen. That's not a scenario that's going to happen.
I just think about going into the Olympic lifts too. If your legs aren't underneath you and your legs aren't feeling strong, how do you think cleans and snatches are going to go? Like, if that's
especially if you're doing them right.
Yeah,
I'll throw that out.
Think about how that's going to go and how much better you're going to feel pulling the barbell from the floor. You know, we talk about the correct setup position in a snatch, and a clean and jerk looks a lot like the bottom of your back squat. You get your back squat super strong. How do you think your first and second pull are going to go? And all of a sudden, you're no longer doing the heave and dive because you're just praying that somehow you pull the bar high enough to dive underneath it and catch it. But instead, you have the confidence because your legs are now strong enough to get in the right position, which now allows you to access the strength that we want you to have when it comes time to perform and potentially go from quarterfinals to semifinals. I know of athletes that I've worked with, and you guys have athletes that you worked with who are literally like one thing away. And a lot of times it's that strength movement that just keeps them knocking on the door, but just a little bit outside because they're not quite strong enough to perform at that highest level. If you follow this program, we are trying to peak you so that that is no longer the case for you. And again, for so many athletes, that could be your entire season. You worked your ass off the entire thing and you're just not quite strong enough to move that heavier barbell when they throw it your way. And it feels like the entire season was like, fuck, I wasted it again, just because you didn't get yourself strong enough to do that one thing.
The other implication is that if you are currently at the semifinals in CrossFit Games level, you have the requisite strength to compete at those levels.
Sure.
You're not necessarily Hatchet, like for a Hatchet level athlete, oftentimes like strength is a limiting factor. It's not necessarily the only thing. It's pretty rare that you see somebody with, elite level conditioning that is deficient in a couple lifts that's preventing them from getting to a higher level. But it does happen. It is a thing where like the Hatchet athlete, like odds are we need to bring all of those things up, not maybe just exclusively strength, but we do want to be focusing a little bit more on that. It's also probably true that the Hatchet level athlete does not snatch or clean as well as a semifinals or CrossFit Games athlete from a mechanical standpoint. So having the strength to, building the kind of base of strength now so that you have a long runway of working on those lifts, the ones that we see more frequently in competition, is setting you up for success. And should they throw in a CrossFit total in quarterfinals with a back squat, like, it's not like you're not going to back squat leading up to those events either. Like you're going to see that strength still exist.
Yeah. The like really thinking granularly, what is the difference? Like if you made that choice, I either have like a ton going on in my personal life, professional life. Like I could do MFT, but I'm going to make the choice to do Hatchet. The strength work is percentage based. So
Personalized.
you bring exactly. You're bringing. There's no other. There's non-mandatory second strength. You have the opportunity to go in and do that. All of the monostructural work is like you are deciding the level of intensity there. That doesn't change from MFT to Hatchet. You know, there might be a short, like a distance that's shorter by 10% to get you into the right window. There's 1 to 2 days of MF2 work. You're bringing, you know what I mean? And then we go into the CrossFit stuff and it's like, you're going to end up with the same amount of output from a physics standpoint as an MFT athlete, because you're going to do a little bit less, but get more volume in or more intensity in, and come out the other side in the same spot. So there's someone that can't hit the intended stimulus on MFT is like jumping into a grave, and someone who's like, I just don't think that this type of volume and plan is going to work in my life without like beating me into the ground. Like, you could end up doing better because you chose the other program. And I don't want to scare people off from MFT. It's a fantastic program.
It's like old school CrossFit, is it not? Is its intensity is what drives the adaptation. Like if you're doing Hatchet volume because you're considering, hey, maybe I don't have enough time. When you do less things, you typically do them with higher output because you have less of your gas tanks zapped. So you just put more intensity into your piece.
I mean, we could like the argument that I like to make when people do the like whether it's in its affiliate class, it's like RX versus scaled, and it's just on Misfit Athletics, it's the same argument, just Hatchet versus MFT. It's like the workouts are written based on what we see the level of athlete that we're referring to do. We see when we write the workout, we're literally saying, well, I know Caroline can hammer this fucking workout in X amount of time. It is therefore appropriate for them. I could write a workout. Here's a workout, 21-15-9 deadlift at 605 and 450 and 14-inch deficit handstand push-ups. Like, congratulations, Matt Frazier now needs to do a scaled workout. It doesn't matter what the workout is. It matters that you are doing the appropriate thing for you, and just and get improving in that way. Like you said, in like intensity, choosing the right thing based on your lifestyle, whatever it is. We could write a program that has to be scaled by 100% of participants, and that's not fun. That doesn't get anybody better. That just creates ambiguity.
Yeah, and we were real good at putting people into the last chance kitchen after semifinals, and like that's to me a pat on the back of like you're getting that many athletes into the top 10. But the ones that I coached, come whenever they were ready, July to get back into things, they got Hatchet Metcons and they're like, oh fuck, these are gonna hurt so bad. Yeah, way worse. Exactly. Well, so like the people on the other side of the fence are like, no, I need to go in and do this 8-minute Metcon in 17 minutes, and like just so I can say I did this many muscle ups, or I do 225 touch and go squat cleans or something like that. And that's just not how
Caroline
it works.
Can't wait to stop doing affiliate class because it's destroying her.
The 1 rep max work, I think it's really important, especially if you didn't follow phase 0, but even if you did, just this idea of what your like lifetime PR is, what your max was in phase 1, what holds you back as an athlete? Is it your technique? Is it I get psyched out by heavy weights? There's so many reasons why someone's 1 rep max would or wouldn't go up, and why I would or wouldn't decide for them what they're going to base their percentage on. So I know an athlete, like let's say I think that they should be able to snatch, 200 pounds, and once they get above 180 or something like that, it's like, something sort of goes haywire there. I would actually give that athlete the lower number on the percentage and give them a shitload of confidence throughout the phase. And there are a lot of, we're not going to spend the time to go through every example here, but it's so important to just ask yourself, if I walked into the gym today and got to do a 1 rep max lift, and I had pretty damn good technique, what is that number? And for some people, it's the max that they just hit. For some people, it's 5 pounds off, 10 pounds off, whatever it is. But follow the whole phase based on a number that you're like, I can snatch that. I think the training max adage, the old adage of the like use 90% of your 1 rep max for a lot of athletes is just way too low. It's going to drive your percentages down too much. It's really about identifying that number on any of these things and saying like, I can walk into the gym on a good day, like once a week and hit this number. That is to me is super important.
I don't know how many people this applies to, but I find myself falling into this trap somewhat often is that my 1 rep max is, I'm more like a higher like I can typically lift a slightly higher percentage of my 1 rep max for a couple more reps.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that I find myself, like we did a 1 rep max squat clean at the gym the other day. And a lot of times I will fall back on like 275 is an everyday lift. 285 is like great. Anything above that is like, wow, you're doing like nice job today. A lot of times I find myself just saying like, I'm just going to use 275 as my max. And I was finding that like, I've seen these numbers before. I actually pretty sure that I just do the same numbers every single time percentage-based squat clean work comes up because I'm always using the same 1 rep max, which may be accurate as to what I can hit on that day, but the percentages aren't necessarily giving me the adaptation that I want.
Yep.
And so I've found myself trying to increase like my kind of the numbers that I would normally hit. I'll add like 5 pounds. And I don't want this to be like oh, Hunter said, I'm just going to add more weight than my percentages say.
What I hear though, is that when you do what's 1 rep max on the board, you do 4 to 7 by 1 at 90% plus, which is a good lifting session.
Yeah.
It is not a test.
Right.
Yes.
So just making sure that you're not falling into the trap of like, have I been doing the same numbers for the past because I just am not actually pushing my 1 rep max like when it comes to test time, or am I doing convenient plate math, which is lazy at best. And it's like making sure that you are recognizing what type of athlete you are and what you need to actually move the needle on like the 1 rep max front a little bit.
Yep.
And when I did that last week, I was very tired.
You have to know yourself too, because if you're someone who always loads up the barbell super heavy, moves like dog shit and wonders why you never PR, that's because you haven't figured out how to do the movement correctly. Or in the opposite direction, you go on Hunter's end, you're like, you know what? I move really well. I can always hit a high percentage of my max over and over again, but the number's not going up. What is going on? You just spent, 3 minutes talking about why you decided to do that. You have a thought process behind it. You're not just be like, fuck, it's 245. It means, it's a red and a blue and I'm good. Yeah. Like there's an actual reason behind it. I just think that's a layer to this that some people don't consider when they're going through their lifting. Start to recognize patterns. And if you haven't recognized patterns, like maybe you have a coach or you have a friend that you lift with and be like, hey man, how'd that look? Or, hey, that looked kind of easy, Hunter. Like I saw you do that last week when we were doing 6x3. Why don't you slap 2.5s on each side or 5s on each side and see what happens? Yeah. Like it's important to have those checks and balances throughout the season because again, it's really easy to fall and, overcorrect in one direction because your lifts are so pretty, or your lifts look like shit. You overcorrect maybe in my direction, which is similar to yours. Like for so long, it's just ogre your way through heavy weights, but doesn't look very well. And now it's like, all right, now I'm on the other side of the equation. Things are starting to look better, but the number is not going up. I need to find a similar ground to be on, somewhere in the middle.
I've talked about what I'm now referring to as Dirt Bike Man multiple times on this podcast. And I want to explain it in just using the reference point of the 7-week phases versus the 9-week phases. So bad program. You're on your dirt bike. You're at the edge of a cliff. And the coach says, see how far you can get, like trajectory wise, like drive off the cliff and see how much distance you can get.
Sir.
Sounds good. Shit program. You basically fall off a cliff. You hit the bottom. You didn't make it very far. You don't feel so great.
Evil fucking Knievel.
We zoom out like 25, 50%, and you realize it wasn't a cliff. It is a dirt bike jump. And a good program allows you to start at the bottom of the jump and drive as fast as you can up that jump to then get as far as you can. We zoom out one more time. We'll call it 90%. And we actually had this huge hill that we got to use. We got to drive the dirt bike as fast as we can down the hill, up the jump, and go as far as we can. If I now get 9 weeks instead of 7 as a programmer, I get to zoom out and make that hill 10% bigger. Trust the process at the beginning. You will do things like EMOM 20 minutes, 3 muscle ups, and then get on a machine. I want you to get 60 muscle ups in the bag. You will do things like a 5x5 squat clean at 65%, something like that. And you will follow a very thoughtful pattern. And as you're making your way through this phase, you should start to realize when the uphill starts. And then again, your results are what happens basically where you land. How far did I get? How far did I jump? And then we're obviously gonna start over. But just this idea of so many athletes look at stuff like that and say, I could do 4 muscle ups. I could do 5 muscle ups. I can do this 5x5 at 75% or 80%. You will go heavy and you will do sets that are very challenging, and they can either feel easier or harder when you get there. And there's so much to trusting that process. There's also so much work that can be done. We talk about this idea of what's different when it comes to intensity, in terms of like, I'm going as hard as I can, or I'm focusing as much as I can. It says perfect muscle ups. There is an insinuation that those squat cleans, or that back squat, or those squat snatch is gorgeous, right? Your butt doesn't lift up too much before the bar lifts. You are bracing the way that you're supposed to. You are reviewing your video while you're doing it. It takes a lot of physical and mental energy to hit 25 beautiful reps, right? That is going to set the table for you to then be able to go and eat at the end of the year. But if you say, well, this isn't really that heavy, what am I doing here? Then when it does get really heavy, it's going to suck. It's not going to be fun at all. So you're a dirt bike man, and travel down that hill, please. Thank you so much. Another change in the strength that most people won't notice unless you're an OG, but I think is really important in terms of execution. We have finally moved away from the West Side barbell style of speed work due to lack of hustle.
Deal with it.
Just a joke. We are moving to more traditional drop sets, where we're still telling you, as you're doing your drop sets, you do your set at 80 and then 75 and then 70, and you work your way down, that you are bringing the same level of speed and energy and really driving through that concentric phase of the lift. But we are trying to make it very obvious by asking for a bigger effort in set 1. So again, instead of 10x3 at 60, you will see things like triples where you do start somewhere near 80 and go all the way down to near 60. And we want you to like give everything you got to the 80, but then know what that feels like and continue to do so as you go down the line. This is one of those things where like you have to learn as a programmer to get over the theoretical versions of things versus this is working and this is not. Like, I know for me personally that if I go next door and do the West Side stuff with like strict press, it's going to work for me. But I am a power-based athlete. I can bring that adaptation every single time. And a lot of the people that follow it get some artificial power, get a little juice in the jug. So when it comes to drop sets, you're going to have these, you're going to go in, you're going to execute them in a very similar way. But there's just a bit more of an insinuation of like, okay, you just did your set at 80%. You know what that feels like. I need you to make these other sets feel that way. I think there's a bit more of an education within the moment. And then at the end of the day, we find athletes with higher 1 rep max numbers because of this. So I've been using them with remote clients for quite a while. And it's just time for that to make its way from the remote realm into the site. Anything on that? I mean, pretty straightforward. Again, a lot of athletes aren't even going to notice, but I can't stress enough, if it says drop sets and it has those instructions.
I don't think a lot of athletes are going to notice,
fast.
but I don't think a lot of athletes understand the idea of moving lifts quickly and how that develops strength and speed and power. And we're referring mostly to the slow lifts like deadlift, squat, bench press, those sorts of things. You try to do a snatch slowly, like that doesn't really happen, but you can certainly do it too fast. And what that looks like is just a poor lift. But when it comes to the slow lifts, this squat, bench, deadlift, those sorts of things, the power lifts, however you want to think about it, speed is strength. Like the faster you move the weight if it's the same, if Sherb and I are both lifting 100 pounds and I move it faster than Sherb, I am getting stronger than he is. Speed is a way to develop strength. And a lot of times an athlete sees a 60% lift or something like that. And it's like, yeah, that looked great, like mechanically sound. Didn't look like there was a whole lot of like intention put into standing up as fast as you can in the instance of a back squat. Move fast and get strong.
Intensity of focus. That's a great way to think of that one. If you're not understanding the concept of intensity as focus, or intensity is like, oh my God, I'm going to die because the barbell's so heavy, or I'm breathing so heavy from the row sprints. Intensity of focus is like, I'm literally trying to press that bar through the ceiling as fast as I can every single time. And your muscles don't know what the barbell weighs. They just know how fast or how much force you can create, which is something that you've taught me a long time ago. And it's a really interesting way to think about getting strong. Like your muscles don't have some like weird, like a gauge on them that says, oh, this is me 95 pounds today. They're literally just applying force to the external object that you're trying to move, or yourself through space. And the faster you move, the better you get, which is why you always hear us talk about like handstand push-ups. If you're doing slow handstand push-ups, specifically like strict ones, you're not going to get better at handstand push-ups. You have to do small, fast sets to eventually build the capacity to do bigger, fast sets. And that's how you move the needle. And sometimes that can get lost on things like a barbell that feels like a throwaway weight, or the fact that we're asking you for, again, you said earlier, like small sets of gymnastics. Like you look at sets of 5 strict handstand push-ups and you go, I can do 15. Well, can you do 5 fast for 20 sets?
That's why strong people get stronger faster. Like there's a bit of a like chicken or the egg here, but I can get stronger than I currently am, not stronger than other people, but stronger than I currently am, faster than other people can, because I lift this way. And of course, there's some of it is just my natural like inclination to do that, but you do see slow movers move slow. Like the weights that we are giving you, it's possible to move fast for anybody because it's a percentage based of your percentage. So you need to move those fast. I'm really excited about this season-long lunge progression I got cooked up. I killed Sherb with it. I killed Caroline with it. I've killed all kinds of people with it. And you will be following a 27-week plan of lunge death. 6x10 weekly in the back rack, 6x10 weekly in the front rack. And then, nope. Front rack misfit sets where you get to start finding your thresholds. You have 9 weeks of the back rack, 9 weeks of the front rack. You will have your legs under you. You will know what your capacity is. And then you go 4x10, 1 by max set. And if you ever hit 20 reps, you get to add weight and rinse and repeat for 9 weeks. If you really make it all 27, like I know one of them might fall on Christmas or some shit. But like if you really make it, you know, 24, 25, 26, 27. Well, I mean, if you're going to eat that much gravy, you might as well fucking
Christmas cookies,
feed the machine, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go head out back, grab a tree, throw it on your back.
I can speak to the fact that it was highly effective. That's movement I'm not very good at. I can typically have a pretty good deadlift, pretty good squat, consider my legs pretty strong, and then got humbled pretty quickly. I think my very first day of back rack lunges was the second or third day of Misfit summer camp last year. And I was getting fucking roasted for using like 145 on my back rack. And they're like,
Xander wanted to shoot a PSA of this is what lunges look like and put like 315 on the bar.
I was like, all right, I'm not there yet, but you have to create a runway that allows you to progress the entire time. And one of the reasons why I started lighter, again, intensity of focus, is like my lunges were like walking a tightrope and bouncing my knee off the floor. And
Dirt bike man.
They didn't look like very good lunges. So, I'd say the one thing I really worked on to the end last season is trying to get single leg strength up so that it wasn't a limiting factor, because historically it's like you squat 400. Why can't you do the 50-pound dumbbells and walk there and back like 3 times without stopping? That's because I didn't have the capacity there. So it's a great accessory movement, great accessory strength movement. And if you're someone who really thinks that's a sticking point for you, like I would not skip that. And I don't think I made it all 27 weeks last year, but I would say I made 85% of them. I probably missed a handful of them throughout the entire phase. I deloaded, but for the most part, it's a very good progression, and it will work for you.
I mean, you just do the math really quick on 27 times like 5 pounds per week and realize how heavy you can possibly get with those. There is not almost nothing more debilitating than not having lunged and then doing something like 6x10 at a weight that you were not only unprepared for, but stupid to do. And you'll just like, well, I can't walk until I have to do my lunges again next week. And by the way, it's supposed to be a little bit heavier, and then you're fucked up for another 7 days. And
I believe the instruction says you should surpass your old self between weeks 4 and 6. So like, if you're like, right now I could go out and do 6x10 at 185 and like, I would be pretty sore, but like I can do it.
You should add weight weekly and surpass your old sets around week 4 to 6.
Yes. So we're looking for new you to appear, anywhere from week 5 to week 7. You're starting to add weight there. And like, there's a lot of injury prevention built into this. And again, probably a topic that belongs on its own in an episode, but it works. Trust us.
Definitely works.
When it comes to strength work, how has you guys' opinion changed just in terms of strength in general within CrossFit? Like focusing so much on 1 rep maxes or back squats or deadlifts versus like, do athletes need to be able to go touch and go, or like, are they going to just put super heavy implements into a workout, make you do it multiple times? Like, how do you guys view that evolution and what should change within a program?
Well, it's funny because originally one of our core tenets was like we would have like periodized strength, and basically almost every strength session we did was periodized to some degree. You know, you're doing maybe one thing was high rep, one thing was high CNS, one thing was speed work, one thing was high rep, and all of these things did make you a stronger athlete. But then when something came around that you hadn't done in a while, you get asked to do, I don't know, you do sets of 5 back squats at 315 in the middle of a Metcon. You're like, I can't fucking squat that. I haven't put that much weight on my shoulders in so long. So I've come around to really realize that, like, I think the GPP sort of rotation works best to feel ready all the time. So it's one of the things that was nice about potentially taking a step back from Misfit Athletics programming and doing Team Misfit is we had a little bit more of like a GPP rotation throughout the entire year, and it felt better prepared. And I think it's one of those things where you just get an athlete more opportunities to experience different stimuli with that within the season. And if you have a glaring weakness, then maybe you double down and you say, all right, I need something that's a little bit more specific for this one thing. But for most athletes, it's, hey, let's get you really fucking fit. And one of the best ways to get fit is to continue to increase your GPP, which is also going to get you stronger. So, it's sort of like a chicken or the egg thing, but I feel like potentially rotating through things more often with a little bit more of a GPP rotation will allow an athlete to get stronger throughout the end season and have the confidence, which is a huge limiting factor for many athletes when it comes time to express strength within the open quarterfinals, semifinals. Like, you want confidence going into those parts of the year.
I kind of think of the isolated lifting sessions as training, whereas lifting in a Metcon is testing. I think that for the most part, athletes have a fixed cap on their 1 rep max strength. We will continue to see those things tested in quarterfinals and the open, hopefully for those athletes to be able to throw down, but we will continue to see 1 rep maxes in competition. We will continue, but it will still necessitate that you move well, and it will still be more important that you can move moderate to heavy, anywhere from light to heavy barbells in a Metcon under fatigue. I think so to kind of circle back, the lifting sessions in isolation are designed to basically, like, one, certainly increase your 1 rep max, but maybe more importantly to make you feel more comfortable at weights that you are likely to see show up in competition, in conditioning settings, or after in a part B or something like that. Like, I don't care what your percentages are in September. I care that when it comes time for 21:15.9 deadlift at 315, that doesn't bury you. And so I think it's important to do the lifting. It's important to continue to push your upper end on those sorts of things, and with the intention of getting strong, but recognize that is just a very small fraction of the totality of what is asked when it comes to competing.
So this season of lifting very much came from Hunter's request to still make sure that we are getting people ready for 1 rep maxes, but simultaneously execute on what you just talked about. Mm-hmm. And then in my mind, I like the first second of it is the panic of, is this thoughtful? Does this make sense? Are we just, turning lifting into CrossFit? And then, what happens there? And then my mind goes to, if I have 27 weeks and it would normally be 9 weeks of volume training and 9 weeks of speed training and 9 weeks of positional work, I now have 27 weeks to accomplish a similar amount of sessions within the same categories, but in a rotation. So I could go in and say, like, I'm looking at, my back squat, and I know that I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 opportunities to go through and do that within phase 1. And then I get the same thing in phase 2. And then I get the volume cycle there. I can go in and say, okay, it's this many drop sets, and we're going to follow this progression through the season, just like we would if we were doing them all at once. This many heavy sessions and this many volume sessions. And that extrapolates out into more CrossFit-y type lifting, where there's, maybe more opportunities to do some touch and go stuff, some complex work, to do some, base building work that we normally would maybe reserve for someone who like really needs to go back to starting strength. But then it's like, you see the adaptations they have and you're like, this might need to make its way out there for everyone to do. So basically what you're seeing is like that request, and then me trying to wrap my mind around how can we do this in the same sort of fashion and know exactly how many times we are, again, doing volume, heavy, positional work, that sort of thing. That's when I think those two worlds can come together and have an athlete that's ready for the things as they appear, as opposed to, we've always said, like, if your program is consistently trying to guess what's going to happen, then basically you have to get really lucky to do well.
Yeah,
we're not into
like
that.
the lifting, the rotational thing, I think is useful for a couple of reasons. Like if you were to put just a commercial gym goer on starting strength, for example, like 5x5, add 5 pounds to each lift every week, like you could get that person very strong very quickly, but we have too many other things to worry about getting you better at. And we also can't really predict what the totality of the training day is going to do to your ability to lift tomorrow. If we have a much more controlled setting of, again, that commercial gym goer, we're going to say Monday is back squat day, Wednesday is bench press day, Friday is deadlift day, and we're not going to do anything on the in-between day, or we're going to be very deliberate to not interfere with those things, with those specific goals. But with our sport, you can't do that. Like, one, it doesn't fucking matter if like the open part B in the open doesn't care if you're tired because of part A. You have to be able to lift under fatigue. You have to be able to lift when you're feeling beat up. You have to be able to go in on semifinals on Sunday and be able to move the heavy barbell for a lot of reps. There's too much to predict to basically try to guess.
Yep.
So having a structured, rotational, kind of varied, not random sort of mindset going into the strength work applies best to the CrossFitter.
Truth. All right. So one of the things that if you're new to the program that you'll notice is there are also biases when it comes to like movements that are appearing phase wide within intervals, metcons, and skill work. And basically what we're doing here is we reevaluate this list that I refer to as Murderer's Row. And these are movements that just seem to fuck with athletes who are otherwise very fit. The 12 movements that made the list for MFT Murderer's Row: burpee, box jump over, pistol, bench, handstand walk, sandbag work, heavy wall ball, GHD thruster, toe to bar, handstand push-up, legless, rope climbs, and muscle ups. That is not to say that there aren't personalized ones that are also on the list. That is not to say that the Hatchet list isn't different. And those are things that I think are super important, but it's not necessarily a strength or a weakness as much as it is that athlete who looks like they are in their nightmare, like the lights turn off and the spotlight comes out. And you're standing there waiting to do another set of this thing and everyone else is done. Like, we can't have athletes have those types of holes. And these are the movements where we see that sort of thing happen. I have CrossFit Games athletes that have very simple movements on their version of this list. And guess what? They have to do more of those instead. So again, I just sort of want to put it out there that that's how we're thinking about these things, and you're going to test it. and then you're going to have 4 skill sessions and 3 metcons or intervals with the combination back in, and then we're going to retest. We're going to be able to do that sort of in a season-long fashion. A lot of it is exposure therapy, like burpee box jump over, specifically being in phase 1.
Oops.
Like, I really get blown away by athletes who seemingly, like, in my mind, it's the new thruster to me. Like it fucks with athletes quite a bit, that it shouldn't. So to me, it's like, okay, so we have exposure therapy, like you programmed them every week. Good, thumbs up, good luck.
In not small numbers.
Right. Because you have to go in, there is the exposure therapy element of it. And then there's also the, like, maybe you're just sprinting into a fucking brick wall. It's like, oh, I can walk around this wall and keep going. That's amazing. Like, why do I keep doing that? And this is one of those movements, fresh, round 1. Like, you walk into a Hatchet class and then a little too much testosterone in the air, and 3, 2, 1, go on a 19-minute workout. And it's like, watch this shit.
Is that last Friday here? Is that last Friday here? Fuck.
So basically it's exposure, it's athlete IQ, it's, in a lot of senses, volume first, the 3x20 20x3 that I talked about. And then, either within the phase itself or by the end of the year, our goal is capacity within sets. Like, we sort of go into a bubble and say, like, yeah, at the highest level, we need you to be able to do this. But hopefully, once again, we have zoomed out far enough to give you the kind of runway where you could actually get a little bit of momentum. We spent a decent amount of time in the Phase Zero podcast on MF2 sessions. You guys have any thoughts or comments on that? Just in terms of, like, seeing people talking about it in Discord, working with your remote clients. Like, I know you have a decent amount of, like, actual personal anecdote on it.
My big PSA to everybody is really don't try to compare how far you're going, how fast you're going. Pay attention to what your heart rate is doing and how you feel both before it, during it, and after it, and what kind of feeling you have the following day or the day after that as well, because essentially you do plenty of training and intensity in zones 3, 4, and 5. If you add another day of, bordering on zone 3, high zone 2, and it's just beating the shit out of you, it's not going to give you the intended benefit. So for me personally, I don't have a super high heart rate. If we go over and we do a terrible running and C2 bike thing like we did last week, my max heart rate tops out at somewhere between 175 and like 178, where the average person is probably like 190, 195.
229.
Or if you're in the beer mile doing Drew's 400 of 229, I think he's dead. But
-9 years.
But what happens there is if you, just again, add another day of that zone 3 work in there because you're obsessed about going the furthest or having the best wattage on the machine, you're not getting the intended benefit. The reason why you notice now it's 170 to 180 minus your age versus just 180 minus your age is I do believe that too many athletes are trying to push how far and how fast they can go at the expense of getting the actual adaptation. Yeah. I think it's really important to realize that when it comes time to do stuff like these long aerobic work, there's like 3 levels of adaptation that occur. First, you teach your muscles to uptake oxygen more so they actually can like use the oxygen you're breathing in. So a higher percentage is used per breath because everyone thinks it's 100% and it's not. It's probably closer to like 60 or 70%. The second adaptation is your body begins to build this lactate threshold where you can now clear waste at a higher rate of intensity. The third one is efficiency. And if you start to push too far and too often, that's one of those things where I actually had a conversation with one of my remote athletes who really loves the zone 2 work, but he wants to do it 6 hours a week. And I'm like, we are not trying to train for the Tour de France or, Olympic rowing. We are CrossFitters. So we have to realize that we want the first 2 adaptations, but sort of not quite get to that third one, because that's when you start to trade, explosive power. You talk about a runner who gets really good at running, Kipchoge is how you say his name.
Yep.
Like, how much do you think he deadlifts? How much do you think he can snatch? How much do you think he can, box jump?
Yo, Kipchoge, I'm calling you out right now. Let's have a snatch off.
I'd like to see that. Now that's a video I want to see. But the idea here, again, is you want those first 2 adaptations to occur without that third one happening. Because again, you have a lot of shit to do every single day in your training. Like you had alluded to earlier with the lifting work. Like you have to think about this with a bigger picture in mind, not just, I want to win zone 2 work. Like that's just a silly thing to say.
Zone 3 work is also fucking trash, especially if there's no skill element. Like sometimes in these muscle endurance workouts or in between when you're pushing in these gas tank workouts, like you're going to dip into that area. It's not a whole lot of adaptation. It's still pretty damn uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, let's work on your aerobic base. And then I want to see zone 5 for a shorter duration,
Yeah.
5 to 10 times a week.
That was like, it was a workout where it was like, this is too long for me to really try to, had chest to bar pull-ups and assault biking. And it was like, this, if I go too hard on the assault, if I go too hard on the bike, I'm not going to be able to do pull-ups. If I do too many pull-ups, well, I mean, I can't go as hard as I can for 9 minutes on the bike. So I was in, like, when I finished the workout metabolically, I was like, but before that I had established that, like, this is a pull-up workout for me. This is a pull-up session, a skill session where for 9 minutes, like, I'm not going to get a ton of, like, metabolic lung capacity type adaptation, but
you don't need more.
I don't
save some for the rest of us.
I don't know about that. But to the MF2 work, the only thing I'll add is, one, pay attention to the instructions as far as, like, on the like, your heart rate might vary from machine to machine just based on what it is and the stimulus and, like, how that kind of impacts your muscles versus your heart rate. And then
choose a pace. Like, that to me is so, like, hugely important to the difference between you literally before, for the most part, if you were doing math its own work, you were going in and trying to basically ride the bike at 180 minus your age the entire time. There's a pretty good chance that you were flirting with your threshold and going above and below it the whole time you were doing that.
Yeah.
The 170 to 180 is the second thing that I want you looking at within this session. It's this set of parameters, these set of brackets that you should be trying to operate within. I want you to say, I'm doing 150 watts today based on previous sessions, and I want you to spend most of that time, like, in the vicinity of 170 minus your age. And if you do make it all the way up near 180 minus your age towards the end, that's fine. And I honestly, like, if an athlete came to me and said, I'm not really, like, I'm making these steady progressions and I am actually a little bit below 170 minus my age, that would not bother me at all if we were making progress.
Way rather see that than above. And the other thing that I was going to add that kind of goes to that is that your MF2 pace is going to change from day to day because other variables are impacting that. Yep. Things like your recovery, even if it is a quote rest day. Like, everybody knows, like, when that Thursday rolls around, some days you feel like, maybe I could train, and therefore maybe your heart rate is a little bit lower at a higher output. Or other days you go in and you're like, I feel like shit. Why is my heart rate so high at such a lower pace? Like, don't be like, well, last week I did 200 watts and this week I have to do 205, even if it means my heart rate goes well past what it's supposed to. Don't do that. The other thing you can take into account is the fact that, like, literally from machine to machine, the calibration is going to be different, is going to be a little bit different. So just because a monitor reads a certain number on one day and a different number on the next day doesn't mean you're regressing or progressing. Just stick with the heart rate. That's the best way to do this short of a blood lactate test.
There's also other factors like the ambient temperature, the humidity, the air quality. There are all these factors that play in. So it's, realistically, use the heart rate as the best guiding light there. And if it's, you start to realize there's correlation between, the C2 bike that's number 5 tells me I'm at 180 and C2 bike number 2 tells me I'm at 190 watts. Like, again, that's just patterns for you to recognize. They shouldn't necessarily, like, make you feel terrible at your session or awesome about your session. It's just meant to be, let's get you in zone 2. Let's create this adaptation so that you're ready to do higher intensity for longer bouts. Like, that is the actual real thing we're after when doing this.
Truth. All right. I want to make a case real quick. Sometimes it will be implicated within the programming. Sometimes it will just be a choice. If your Super Bowl is the open, quarterfinals, or age group semifinals, one, you should be following Hatchet. The next layer is, how good of a rower am I? And if it is not like, I will fuck you up, I don't care who you are, almost all of your MF2 sessions throughout the year should be on a rower. Even if the site does not tell you to do that, you should be on a rower. And then if you're going in and you're choosing extra pieces and you're not consistently making sure that your power output is there on the rower or in things like bar facing burpees, burpee box jump overs, there is a problem.
Coach, my fingers hurt.
And it's not just because it's the only implement that they're going to use. It's also because it's a fucking incredible implement, and we get that adaptation that we're talking about, and we don't localize it to the midline, the upper body, or the lower body. We are essentially getting the opportunity through each leg drive and each, bracing attempt and pulling, because the stroke rate, because that turnover is a little bit slower, to almost do all three at once. It is an incredible machine. And if you really did, if you did 27 weeks of twice a week on the rower, the amount of adaptation that you would make on the rower,
I rode my 2K.
then personally would be incredible. And you would get used to it. We've got a few people at the gym that rode at a fairly high level, in actual boats and shit. And they're like, yeah, you don't eventually you just put tape on your hands because they hurt, and your butt doesn't hurt anymore because it always hurts and it doesn't matter. You get over those things. So just fast forward in your brain to that moment. You're going to get used to the discomfort that is, sort of built into that. And it would be really cool as a case study if someone let us know what happened to their wattage if they followed the instructions for an entire off season. Please, please, please do not skip your rowing work. It is so important to be good at that for everyone, honestly. Yes. But if you know the fucking cardio implement that they're going to use, and it's also the one that can, make you stronger and fitter all at the same time.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Maybe use it. We're going to end with 3 very much programming housekeeping items before final thoughts. You're going to notice that the pacing instructions will still be there, but we're going to tell you what gear you should be on given machines. There will be a template to download that gives you an idea of what these ranges look like. So it'll say something like working window is 10 to 15 minutes. So your round that you're doing is 10 to 15 minutes, and then your rest period is between 30 and 60 seconds. That's first gear. So you then go in and look at all of the workouts that you've done, and you make your best guess at what that would be. You do that for the entire matrix. And the cool thing is, if you have bookends, it's really easy. It's just math. You have, 6 gears in between first and eighth. So do a little, I got a 12-second gap divided by 6, then it moves 2 seconds per, something like that. Am I making sense here?
Thanks for doing that math for me.
I'm tracking. I think there's definitely some calculus going on in people's headphones right now, but
yeah,
the idea.
I promise you that if you have your bookends, that you can guess.
Bookends being first gear,
and eighth gear.
Very slow, very sustained pace. For
1 gear
periods.
Up from MF2.
Eighth gear is fucking hammer at full send,
not full
the
send.
Gaps.
Not full send.
Sorry, the build.
Yes. Yeah. Build
version of full
8
send.
by 90, 8 by 90 seconds, rest 4 minutes. Everyone's favorite workout. Please fill that in. And I just had a remote coach ask a really good question of okay, so it says 6th gear on the Echo bike. And my athlete's like, what? You are not testing. You're not going in and going balls to the wall and then pulling your average out on the backside. You're making an educated guess based on your athlete IQ. Maybe you go into Discord and ask for a little bit of help. We will help you figure out what that pace is, and then you update each time it happens. So you want to think about it a bit more in that linear progression mindset of I did 153 last time and whatever, 4th gear on the rower. And it was good work. I touched zone 5 a few times, but I was comfortable. Okay, maybe I'm going to jump 2 seconds instead of 1, that sort of thing. So we're looking to update this matrix the whole year, the entire time we go through. And you will have sessions where you adjusted in the wrong direction. You will have sessions where you're man, I really just, there's something about fourth gear and fifth gear for me. That's sort of middle no man's land. That's really challenging. And I guessed a little bit too high. You can adjust in the moment and drop back a second or two per 500, per 1K, whatever. 30 seconds per mile if it's running. And then the next time you go, again, adjust your information to get into that spot. So that matrix will definitely be available on Discord and probably be a download link somewhere. I don't know exactly how that all works. But it will be there. I promise. Accessory work. You guys had Sherb and Hunter and basically everyone other than me on your team the entire time, just in terms of I don't have 4.5 hours to do your accessory work, you shithead. And again, we tried to coach it last year just in terms of like, this is ideal. So then dial it back for what fits. The instructions are now in there for every single one. It has the specifics. It gives you the set range that you could do. It tells you that if you are an open athlete, we are looking to get, 0 to 1 or 0 to 2 accessories, all the way up to games athletes. It's ideal if you do all three. So we have instructions for everyone to go in and do the accessory work based on what their goals are and how much time they have. I'll still say it. The highest end of the sets, reps, and rest are the most ideal if you're interested in winning the CrossFit Games. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I think it's important.
Intriguing.
Maybe the rest periods would throw people off. Some of them do.
If I only do the high end accessory work while I go to the CrossFit
That's
Games?
all you need, Hunter.
You have a better chance of going.
Get fucked.
Goes from
I want to guarantee that
18% to 19%.
What the fuck?
Last but not least, deloading.
What?
All right. There's an article. There's an article on the website about deloading.
Still get itchy when you hear that word? I feel like there was like a 2-year period where we weren't allowed to say that word.
Well, that's because, okay, so in the article, literally in the first paragraph,
I know.
It's like back in the day, the blog was free and like the metrics that now everyone's looking at on Instagram and all of this were just straight up page views. We had the fucking graph and it was like day one of phase one. Holy shit, 20,000 page views. This is amazing. The first deload week shows up. Negative 20,000.
Sherb and Hunter log on.
Yes, Sherb and Hunter are the only people that log on. And it started this decade-long battle for, do we deload and just not call it deload? Do we try to trick people? Deloading is a strategic implement. It's not an insinuation that you could not do another week of programming. But there is a lot of merit to when an athlete actually needs to deload. There's some people where we just throw a new stimulus at you and a few new biases, and like by week 3 or 4, like you're dead, like you're really struggling. And that's when on the site, these instructions will start to appear. The cool thing is if you are like, the fucking magna cum laude at Hardo University, you can follow the program for 9 weeks. Congratulations, you did it. If you are thinking about it from the standpoint of I'm going to overreach and I'm going to go hard, and at some point between weeks 3 and week 7, I'm probably going to need a deload. You're going to have 2 options. One is MFT and Hatchet have deload templates already built, already in there for you. Actually, I'd say 3 options. So it's option number 1. Option number 2, you use that pre-built template and you say, it's my deload week and I don't want to do handstand push-ups, and you change it to muscle-ups or something like that. Option number 3, within the article, and this would be free for anybody, you don't have to follow the program, is a deload template that is blank with step-by-step instructions on how to fill that out, on how to go in and do that. So you've got multiple options here. You are hopefully, with the help of Discord or your remote coach or whatever, thoughtfully inserting a deload week in here, but it prevents injury. It allows you to bounce back with higher intensity. It is still a full week in the gym. Like, you will have more free time because there's less volume, but we're still working through conditioning pieces. They're just not for time. We're working through lifts. They're just not heavy. Like, we want you to stay in that natural rhythm of like, my diet's dialed in and my sleep is good. And it's still very much a strategic part of the program, but it is allowing you to once again restart the clock on overreaching for your programming, because that is what's going to make you better. like staying at that, what would be like the long-term version of zone 3 of just, going through the paces and checking boxes. It's not going to work. So go harder, take your deload week. You will thank yourself for it.
If you don't do it at some point, it's going to happen to you anyways. You're going to get an injury. You're going to have that like weird moment in the middle of like November, December, where you don't want to go to the gym, and all of a sudden all this great momentum you built, you literally shut it off completely because you're just so overwhelmed with how your body is feeling and how you're performing that it's going to happen to you, whether you want to or not. Why not make it a calculated choice that you choose to make for yourself as opposed to having it happen to you?
Monday, September 4th at misfitathletics.com. If you are an open, quarterfinals, or age group semifinals athlete, you're going to follow Hatchet, and we're going to have specific instructions on how to make your own track within Hatchet, how to personalize, how to get better over the course of the entire season. If you are a semifinals or CrossFit Games athlete on the individual or team side, MFT is going to be right there. 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the right choice for you. Final thoughts.
I'm excited, chance to have everybody kind of on these 2 programs with specific tracks for where they want to have their season go. I think the ambiguity there is one of the things that we really try to get rid of with the way the programming is structured now. And for a long time, it was, let's have these, 4 or 5 different programs that we would call clearly distinct different things. And it created a situation where an athlete is like, I don't know if I'm this here, or sometimes I'm here, but sometimes I'm over there. It just creates a situation where you don't have a structured plan throughout the year. So like you said, I think probably 10 or 20 minutes into the podcast, like make that decision ahead of time through, listening to the podcast, evaluating how you performed in phase 0, and stay on the course for the entire season and see what happens to you, because we've seen it happen too many times in the 12 plus years we've been doing this. An athlete gets excited the first few weeks, they bounce around a bit, shiny object over there, and poof, they're gone. And then it comes around to the competitive season, they perform how they don't want to, they perform at a level that's lower than their expectations. They're disgruntled and they don't want to do it again. Stay the course.
I think a huge portion of what makes our program superior to every other program is that we give and put a decent bit of onus on you all to follow the general guidance that we provide in an effort to make yourselves better, rather than telling you exactly what to do every single moment of every single training day. There are instances where we're giving this podcast to you so that you have information as to how to choose things like my optional piece because I need to work on a stimulus, how to personalize the MF2 sessions, how to think about lifting when you're using the 1 rep max that you hit in a competition 43 years ago and haven't hit since, or maybe if you're on the opposite end like me, adding a little bit of weight because you're getting too comfortable with these percentages. You can personalize the program as much or as little as you want to, but the more kind of onus that you take upon yourselves, the more successful it's going to be. We talk about it with remote coaching all the time. I will meet you at the 50% point. I will not reach 51. Okay. We want you to reach back.
Because you'll do worse.
Because you'll do worse, and because you will be much more satisfied at the end of the day with the progress that you've made, because you've taken it upon yourself to think a little bit farther ahead than maybe the other athlete who is just left foot, right foot. Yes, sir. No, sir.
We will never sell you guys the 100% version of that program that is like sex sells. Like we're gonna put as many buzzwords and as many like triple crossover backflips. Like we're gonna like flavor of the month. We're gonna do that. We will never sell that program, because at the end of the day, there's something about like we would rather have less people do so well on this program than a shitload of people not do well. Like that's something that I think there's a level of integrity there that is super, super important, I know, to me. And then the sort of new process of programming this year makes it clear that it's important to you guys. There's a story about Quentin Tarantino writing movies that Uma Thurman's in, and she'll be in another room and he'll write what he think is like the line. Like he's known for his dialogue. He's known for these obscure conversations that are happening. And he would bring the script out and she would read it. And he wouldn't even wait long enough for words to come out. He would just try to gauge her reaction of her like facial expression. And he talked about how like he would write what he thought was the greatest thing ever, and he'd be heartbroken when he went out, but he would sort of go back and forth. And this year with the guys, I have the plan for the whole thing already done and laid out. Like that is the moment of me slapping that on the table and then you guys going, where's this? What about this? Why isn't this in there? And the ability as a group of us three to be able to like, you guys know that you can say that to me. And then the fact that I'm willing to run back to the typewriter in this, analogy and get after it and come back and go back and forth and do these things, I think is why this is such a good program. And I don't know, there's something really special about translating all these really cool things that we do with our remote clients and finding that way to do it for the athletes. Because if they keep coming back to me year after year and they want to go to the CrossFit Games and the program's exactly the same, it's like, what kind of adaptation, like how am I overreaching within this? Like that would be the 100% in the opposite direction. Like I have to bring all of this because you just fucking copied and pasted from the year before. That's not going to work. So how do we do that? How do we create these new avenues for adaptation and athlete IQ and all this stuff for the athletes? And I think we've done a pretty damn good job of it.
Yep.
Fuck yeah.
Can we do it?
Y'all.
Done.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of the Misfit Podcast. Phase 1, September 4th, misfitathletics.com. If you are an open, quarterfinals, age group, semifinals, or games athlete, we have programs for you. We have specific tracks that are laid out for your entire season, but all you have to do is show up, sign up for that 2-week free trial, and then you will see your instructions day to day. You go in and execute. Head over to our free Discord. Make sure you're checking out our YouTube and our Instagram. The more of the ecosystem that you really take in, the more you're going to be able to execute on the program. And you know what? We're going to be here every single week during this. We're going to show up. We're going to talk about this stuff. We're going to check in on you on Discord. So phase 1, boys, year 12.
Let's fucking go.
Let's do it. We'll see you next week.